Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. These guys are one of my favourite Swedish breweries. I've had many nice beers from them over the years. I would say that this brewery are best known for their big Imperial stouts, their fruity juicy sours, and in more recent times they've also become well known for their different kinds of IPA, but it's always nice to try the new beers from these guys. The one that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I know they can do very well with, and it's a little bit different from the ones we've had from them in this style bracket before. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see how this one turns out. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again, Göteborg, as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Always got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in with the Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition. For this review, we are going to go a little bit out towards the east of the city to Landvetter, next to the airport, and that means that we are going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Dugges Brewery. So this particular beer is called Cake Galore. It comes in at 11.5% ABV, and they're describing this one as a cognac barrel-aged Imperial Stout. So yeah, this beer was released as part of the temporary sortiment, toward the start of March 2022, and yeah, I believe this is the first cognac barrel-aged Imperial Stout that I've had from Dugges. But of course, we've had many nice Imperial Stouts from Dugges Brewery over the years. Probably the pinnacle one that I would recommend everyone to try would be the Egypt. That's the kind of OG one, but that really shows you just how good Dugges are within this particular style. So it's always nice to try different variants of them. This one is of course part of their Future series, which is their series of barrel-aged Imperial Stouts. They do have a series called Mega as well, which are Imperial Stouts as well. Some of them barrel-aged, I believe, but they can go up to about 15% ABV. So yeah, definitely worth trying some of these big Dugges Imperial Stouts. But yeah, I believe this one has cardamom, vanilla and almond added into it as well. So it should be very nice actually. But let's crack on with this one and see how we go. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Dugges Brewery before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you once again about Dugges Brewery. So as I've mentioned to you already, Dugges Brewery are based in Landvetter on the eastern outskirts of Gothenburg up on the Swedish west coast, and the brewery was established back in 2005 in Mölndal to the south of the city by Mikael Engström Dugge, whom of course it takes its name from. But a few years prior to this, Mikael had met an Englishman who was selling second-hand breweries, and this really got him thinking about brewing his own beer. So he studied the admittedly very complex Swedish alcohol laws, he visited various other breweries around the country, and he started buying up equipment to put together his own brewery, which culminated in the opening of their first facility in Mölndal back in 2005. Over the following years, they continued to develop new recipes, grow the production a little bit, but by 2009 the brewery had outgrown their original premises, and so they moved to Landvetter the following year in 2010. So the older brewery had a capacity of 1,500 hectolitres of beer per year, or 150,000 litres, however you want to put it, but the new brewery started with a capacity of 8,000 hectolitres per year, so 800,000 litres, and this has been more than doubled in recent years. The brewery were known in the early days for their kind of fruity juicy sours, such as the Tropic Thunder, a collaboration they did with Stillwater Artisanal, and also for their Imperial Stouts. Like I mentioned earlier, Egypt is another one of their kind of benchmark beers, I guess we could say. So yeah, if you're looking to get an idea of what Dugges Brewery are all about, Egypt and Tropic Thunder Those are the two that you really should try. But in more recent times, they've been experimenting a little bit more with different styles. These days, they have various different series of IPAs. They have the Fresh and the Crush series, which are New England IPAs. They've also got the Bite series, which is West Coast IPAs. And yeah, there are a few other series in there as well. There's a series of kind of wheaty based beers as well, actually, but the name of that series has gone right out of my head. But they've also been investing heavily in their barrel aging program, and they do, of course, have various different series of stouts. They've got the Futures, which are the barrel aged ones, and then they have the Mega as well, which are just the big kind of 15% beasts. But yeah, these guys are a very, very well respected brewery. In addition to the brewery, they are also co-owners of the two Brewers beer bars in Gothenburg, along with All In Brewing, who are one of the numerous gypsy breweries operating in the city, and also Electric Nurse, who are owned by Mikael's daughter Ida and her husband John. So yeah, they're another brewery that you really should check out. Actually, they've got some very, very nice beers. But like I say, this brewery are mainly known for their kind of imperial stouts and sours, but in more recent times as well for their IPAs. But one of my favourite Swedish breweries, as I've mentioned, and I think that's all I can really tell you about them for now. They've been very prolific over the years. Probably some of my favourite beers from them have also been the Imperial coffee stouts, but they haven't done as many of those in recent times as they used to. But I would love to see them do like a coffee bean series of Imperial stouts, because back in the day they had some really, really nice collaborations with Hunter and Sons, who are now defunct, of course, in England. And you know, the Key and the Sidamo Dimtu, those are probably two of my favourite beers that I ever had from Douglas. These guys really got me into coffee Imperial stouts, so I have them to thank for that. But yeah, if you want to learn more about this brewery, then you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's crack on then and have a little look at this beer itself. So as you can see, this one is in one of the more kind of classic 330ml Douglas bottles. Recently, of course, they've started releasing their lighter beers in cans. I don't know if they will eventually do that with the stouts as well, but yeah, Douglas Bryggeri have been releasing their Imperial stouts like this for a long time. There you can see plain bottle cap as you always get from Douglas Bryggeri, and you've got the typical style of artwork that you always get from them too. It tells you a little bit about the beer on the side here. It says this is Cake Galore. For this one, we used some flavoury cognac barrels that go well with the beer's original flavours of cardamom, vanilla and almond. Here, the sweetness from the beer and the fruitiness from the barrels come together perfectly. So let us fika, because everybody loves dessert, right? Yummy. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, 11.5% Imperial Stout with cardamom, vanilla and almond, aged in cognac barrels. It doesn't say for how long, right enough, but this is another member of the Future series by Douglas Bryggeri. So yeah, also the beer itself, I should point out, it contains oats and rye in the malt base. So this should be quite interesting. I wonder how close this will be to a sort of pastry stout, actually. But yeah, we'll get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. And I believe this beer cost me 60 Swedish krona. I want to say maybe 70. Yeah, I think it was 60. I do think it was actually 60. So yeah, this cost me 60 Swedish kroner, €6, somewhere in the region of like £5 sterling, and I guess that works out at about $7 American, just for those of you watching in different places across the world. But let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. So yeah, let's do this then. The last Imperial Stout that I had from Douglas, of course, was the collaboration one that they did with Electric Nurse. Was it called is it Skull Egypt or something like that? The name of it's gone right out of my head, but it was a lovely, lovely beer actually. A big barrel aged version of maybe it was called Big Skull or something. I think it was called Big Skull actually, and it was just a big barrel aged version, if you like, of yeah, the Skull Imperial Stout from Electric Nurse, and but aged in some of the Douglas barrels, of course. It was absolutely lovely. But yeah, anyway, as you can see with this one, and as you would expect from an Imperial Stout, this is poured a lovely dark ebony rosewood colour. Not much head on this one. There's just a nice kind of thin ring around the edge of the glass there, and I would say it's a kind of light sort of fawn type colour. But yeah, just a few kind of small bubbles. I'll just let you have a little look at that. You can see that nicely on the camera. But yeah, not a lot of head to this one. And yeah, that's kind of to be expected when you've got a big 11.5% Imperial Stout. It's not, quite a few of them don't hold their heads for all that long, especially the barrel aged ones. I find that the head doesn't hold all that long when it comes to barrel aging. But yeah, the colour of this one, as you can see, lovely dark ebony rosewood. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on one, the type of malts that you use. That goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar is caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. Usually Imperial Stouts, especially the modern craft ones, will have a very long wort boil, like 6 hours or something daft like this. But any adjuncts that you put in any barrel aging that you do can affect the colour of the beer, although with Imperial Stouts it's a little bit difficult just because of how dark the malts are inherently in the first place. But I mean, in terms of what you would expect from the appearance of an Imperial Stout, this one is pretty much spot on, to be honest with you. I will point out as well that when we shine the light through it, it does have a little bit of that kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi coloured edge to it. But yeah, it seems to be quite a hazy one. And to be honest, when you've got oats and especially rye in the malt base, you're going to get quite a bit of haze to the beer as well. So not the clearest of stouts, but then the colour usually stops you seeing through them anyway. But that's by the by. But yeah, in terms of appearance, nothing unusual about this beer. Let's take a look at the aroma and just see how we get on with it. Very, very curious about this. Ooh, that does smell very, very nice. Yeah, it's you really can get a lot of the cardamom out of this. Yeah, it smells a little bit like, it smells a little bit like some of these buns. It really just smells like a kind of cinnamon bun in a lot of ways to me. But yeah, it's cardamom obviously, which smells a little bit different from cinnamon. But yeah, it really has that kind of lucibula type thing about it. Is that am I remembering the right one? Lucibula is the one with the saffron. It really, there's a lot. It's difficult to keep track of all the names of the different Swedish cakes. I do like them all, but yeah, this one, it really does smell just like some of these Swedish fika buns that you get. So it's got a lovely kind of fluffy bready backbone to it. Yeah, you can smell the cognac barrel aging in there as well. I do get quite a lot of vanilla out of this one. The more that I smell of it too, the vanilla really starts to sweeten up. But yeah, this is a really interesting smelling stout. Actually, it's quite different from the other ones that I've had from Dugis before. But let's just try and break this down for you a wee bit. But as I say, the first impression you're going to have of this one is of one of these kind of Swedish Bryggeri buns, basically. So yeah, this one smells like Mormor's Bryggeri, which is a famous bakery chain here in Sweden. But yeah, aroma wise, this is very, very nice. So let's focus on this then. Backbone of the beer, you can smell that lovely kind of smooth but slightly dry. I always find that cognac barrels give you this slightly dry woody character, but yeah, you can smell that lovely smooth kind of oaky woody character in there. But on top of that, you smell the kind of infusion, those sort of grapey, datey, slightly dry, raisiny, figgy notes that you get. I always find, cognac, it's got a kind of sultana-y, datey type vibe to it. So you can smell the smooth wood in there, the sort of dry, sultana-y, datey type fruits on top of it. And there's a wee bit of red fruit in there as well, actually. So you can really smell that forming the backbone of the beer. But on top of that, you start to get that kind of cakey, sort of cinnamon bunny bready type thing. I'm not sure of the exact terminology for the stuff that these cakes are made of, come to think of it. But yeah, it really has it's got that nice kind of light bready cakey sort of thing in there, but within that you're getting a lot of vanilla, absolutely. And the cardamom, the cardamom spice in this one is quite apparent as well. But when you've got rye and oat in this, it kind of makes sense. Because it does smell very, very smooth, so the oats will be smoothing it out, but the rye will be giving you some of the kind of bready character as well. So you can really smell that. But like I say, the more that you smell of this beer, the more the vanilla starts to come out of it. And yeah, the cardamom kind of is like an umbrella over everything, but it's like the vanilla's trying to punch its way out of the cardamom and the bread, if you like. So that's really interesting. Um, it's one of these beers that kind of smells almost exactly as you would expect it to. You can get little hints of like chocolate out of this one. Like there is a little hint of a kind of, just a very slight cocoa nib to it, but that's very, very minimal. And that really takes a back seat. And I do get a little bit of a sweet, I do get a little bit of, yeah, I do get a little bit of you do get a wee bit of brown sugar out of it, but these kind of typical chocolatey brown sugary notes that you'd expect of an Imperial Stout, they really do take a back seat in this. So yeah, the adjuncts in this one are really taking the front seat. The almond, I think, is a little bit more kind of subtle, if you like. I mean, it's quite difficult to detect the almond, in honesty. I think it's really taken a back seat to the vanilla, and you can smell a little bit of the nuttiness underneath the vanilla. But yeah, I'm not getting too much of the almond in this one. This is about the cardamom. It's about the vanilla. It's about the kind of woody characters underneath, but the rye is giving it that big kind of bready, cakey sort of thing on the aroma. It's a very interesting beer. This, as I say, this is different from what we've had from Dugas Brewery in the past. But yeah, the typical chocolatey, brown sugary sort of things, those are really at a minimum in this beer as well. But yeah, the way that this goes together, I think, is very, very nice. So yeah, it gets a big thumbs up from me, this one, on the malty and malty barrel and I guess yeasty side of the aroma as well, because the yeast will be contributing to some of the kind of cakey vibes of this beer. On the hoppy and fruity side of things, there's a wee bit of grassiness to the beer on the green component, maybe a teeny little bit of earthiness, but when it's barrel aged, of course, most of the hoppy character is going to drop out of it. It didn't say how long it was barrel aged for. That's another thing, but I'd guess maybe at least 6 months, maybe 12. So yeah, quite a bit of the hoppy character will drop out of it at that point, and Imperial Stouts are not hop forward beers anyway. But yeah, a little bit of grassiness, a little bit of earthiness, and on the fruity side of things, you do get a little bit of a kind of raisiny note out of it. You can smell a little bit of an almost slightly blackberry kind of vibe, but then you've got a lot of these dried fruity characters, but a lot of that I think is coming from the barrel aging rather than from the hoppy side of the beer. There's maybe a wee bit of a figgy note from the hops as well, but yeah, the hoppy fruitiness to me seems a little bit sharper, a bit of raisin and a bit of a kind of blackberry type character. But aroma wise, this is, as I say, definitely quite an interesting one. This is the closest beer I've had to a pastry stout, I think, in terms of aroma from Dugas Brewery thus far. So yeah, as I always say, take a wee bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of this one before you get stuck into it. But yeah, it seems like it's going to be quite an interesting beer. So yeah, let's crack on. So this one is the Cake Galore, an Imperial Stout at 11.5% ABV with almond, cardamom and vanilla, then aged in cognac barrels from Dugas Brewery in Landvetter here in Sweden. Let's get stuck in. Slanja, skål, cheers. That is quite interesting. Yeah. Now, first impression of this one, this is quite different to what we've had from Dugas Brewery in the past. Because the stouts that I'm used to having from Dugas Brewery, I suppose we've had ones with tonka beans and stuff like that in them before from Dugas. Dugas are very good at using adjuncts and random adjuncts at that in their beers. But yeah, quite a few of the best Imperial Stouts that I've had from Dugas, of course, have been the coffee Imperial Stouts and the very, kind of old school ones like Egypt, Big Egypt as well. I've never tried the regular Egypt, I've had the Big Egypt. But yeah, I wish they would re-release the original one, I'd be curious about that. But yeah, this one is a little bit different actually. The first impression that I have of it is that it's quite a savoury stout, this one. It actually is starting to show signs of a kind of pastry stout vibe, but I get a lot of that kind of pastry stout kind of savoury quality out of this one, but also quite a lot of wood. So for me, this is a little bit drier actually than some of the other Dugas ones that we've had before. So I think it will take a wee bit of time to just kind of open up and show itself. So bear that in mind when you first try this one. The other thing I'll say about it as well that strikes me in the first impression is it's actually quite light in its mouthfeel, but you have to remember that with barrel aged beers is that quite often you sacrifice a little bit of the mouthfeel for more of the kind of infused flavours. But quite often, some breweries at least will brew the beer to be a little bit thicker in its mouthfeel originally if they are planning to barrel age it. So yeah, that's worth bearing in mind too. But this one for me feels a bit lighter than some of the other Dugas ones we've had, but it's very clean as well. But yeah, it's interesting. It really is an interesting one, this, and I think it does get sweeter the more that you, the further you progress into the aftertaste too. So I like it. I do like it. So, where do we start with this one? Middle third of your palate. Border region between middle third, that region between everything else in your palate, the middle region. So you can feel the backbone of this one is as we suspected. You get that smooth, woody backbone. And I'll say straight away, this is one of these beers that is actually quite similar. It plays out in the flavour as you would expect it to from the aroma. So yeah, smooth, woody backbone in there, absolutely. And yeah, the cognac barrel I think gives you a wee bit of the dryness, but the thing that you'll find with the cognac barrel is that the further you go into the aftertaste with it, you start to get the fruitiness of it. You get that sort of sultana, kind of datey kind of vibe. Yeah, I think sultanas and dates are the best way. I would say that describes what you get from a cognac barrel pretty nice in terms of fruit. So yeah, you get this, for me, the cognac barrel is a lot more dry, but the kind of dry fruity characters you get from cognac barrels are absolutely lovely. Cognac barrel aged barley wines are fabulous. I really enjoy those. But yeah, on top, yes, you've got that nice smooth woody backbone in there, as we say, that smooth woody character. On top of that, you've got a nice, as we say, dry kind of fruity character, like I was saying, a bit of sultana, a little bit of a kind of datey sort of thing toward the front of that. You can feel a little bit of the nuttiness. The almond is a little bit more obvious in the flavour, I would say that. So on the front half of that middle third of your palate, there's a wee bit of almond in there. There's a wee bit of how do you say, you can get the vanilla starting to come out of it as well, but like I say, the vanilla kind of grows in prominence the further into the flavour of this beer that you go. But yeah, this beer, I can feel it starting to open up now. You always have to be aware of this with barrel aged beers, and especially stouts. I think generally speaking, they take a wee bit of time just to open up, and that's one of the benefits of doing a slightly longer review. Actually, is you get to see the beer do that. So, on top of the kind of fruity, the wood and the slightly kind of dry fruity layer that you get, that's when you can feel the kind of bready, cakey side of the beer coming out. So you get this nice kind of, I can only really use Swedish descriptors for this because it is like that. It's like a semla bun kind of card. Yeah, it's a kind of like, it's like a semla bun lussebulle type thing. It's like a kind of bready, kind of just cakey sort of thing. For those of you watching abroad, if you think about the bready texture you get from a cinnamon bun, right, think about that, but then put a cardamom flavour in it. That's what you're getting out of this. So that kind of bready, cakey-ish layer that you're getting out of this one, it's got the vanilla laced into it, and you can feel that the breadiness grows in prominence, and it gets sweeter and sweeter the further that you go into the aftertaste with this beer. That bready side of the beer really grows in prominence the further that you go. But it's interesting too, because on top of that bready layer, you can really feel the sort of smoothness of the oats on the top of the beer, and that's quite interesting. I mean, for me, as I said, the thing that's a bit unusual about this beer is that you don't get much in the way of like a chocolatey or brown sugary vibe out of this one. It really is a very kind of just, as I say, bready, cakey, smooth, stout. I really like that about this one. Absolutely. Yeah, this is very, very nice in the way that it goes about its business. In the middle of the palate, I do get a little bit of you do get a wee touch of a brown sugar, but not a lot. Just like a wee teeny little bit of a kind of toasty, like almost brandy like brown sugar. It's a wee bit like that, actually. But yeah, that's just the thing that really surprises me about this one. I don't think there's actually anything else we need to say about the middle third of the palate in this. It's actually surprisingly straight shooting in the way it goes about itself. This one, I think we've described that as much as we need to. But yeah, like I say, the vanilla really starts to push its way out more and more the further you go into the aftertaste, and that bready side of the beer becomes a bit more. That bready side of the beer grows in prominence a little bit. But yeah, let's focus on the back third of the palate then. So the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you can feel that the breadiness just builds up a wee bit. Yeah, it really does. The breadiness of the beer really does kind of build up a little bit more into the aftertaste the further that you go. But yeah, I think that works. But you do get a little touch within that border region. I do think there is a wee tiny touch of like a sort of cocoa nibby type thing, but it's very minimal. It is very, very minimal. But into the back third of the palate, then again, you can feel that the woody character is there, and it feels a little bit drier there. But on top of that, you get a far thicker bready note out of this one, and you can feel it does have a little touch more graininess to it, but yeah, the grainy character in that is not overly much more. It just feels like it's a slightly thicker and more dense bready layer on the back third of the palate, and on top of that, of course, you're getting some of the yeasty elements out of the beer. So yeah, you get a nice kind of yeasty element out of this beer for sure, and that sits on top of the bready layer. And for me, the yeasty element, it has a wee bit of, it's almost like, it feels a little bit like a kind of more dense brown bready type character in there, but at the same time it has a little bit of a kind of cakey and sort of spicy element to it as well. So all of that, all of that goes together quite well in this beer. So yeah, for me it really works in that sense. So yeah, back third of the palate, woody layer, a little bit drier, thicker, kind of bready, cakey sort of layer that has a wee bit more graininess to it. Then on top of that, you get the yeast, which is like a kind of dense, slightly rye breadish type thing. It certainly feels a little bit more kind of dry, and you can feel the sort of cardamom spice sort of amalgamating. Can we say that? Yeah, amalgamating kind of around that kind of bready doughy layer. So the back third of the palate is a wee bit more kind of spicy in a sense, if we can say that, than the middle third. But yeah, as you go from back to front in this beer, the back third of the palate, the flavour is quite a little bit taller. Then as you move into the middle third of the palate, it condenses down a wee bit and squashes together. But on the hoppy side of things, the back, well, I should say as well, there's not so much of a hoppy vibe to this beer, but again, that's because it's barrel aged. But yeah, in the back corners of the palate, there's a wee bit of earthiness. As you move further forward, it's a little bit kind of herbal in a sense, and as you reach the front corners of the palate, it's a little bit more. You do get a little bit of a more kind of floral aromaticity out of this thing. So yeah, I do like that about how it goes together. But again, the floral notes in this are quite smooth. Round the front curve of the palate, there's a little bit of a lighter, grassy vibe to it. But yeah, the way that this beer goes about its business in that regard is very, very interesting. So yeah. So yeah, the way that this beer goes about its business in that on that side of things is quite nice. Yeah, the hoppy side of the beer is just very, very smooth. Let's focus on the front third of the palate and the fruity side of things then. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a bready build up in there. It's got a wee bit of a kind of creaky, brown bready sort of thing. Then the base of that front third of your palate is a little bit more kind of smooth and kind of oaty, actually. I think that's fair to say. It has this little bit of a kind of smooth oaty thing, but you can feel a bit of the wood and a wee touch of an almost rye bready sort of thing in there as well. But sitting on top of that, you get that nice kind of oily bubble where the fruity, juicy esters roll their way out of the beer. So, the fruity side of the beer is actually a wee bit different from what was picking up in the aroma. I thought it was going to have a wee bit more kind of sharpness to it in a way, but the fruity side of this beer is really quite dry fruity, to be honest. I mean, as I say, the back half of that front third of your palate, you get a bit of sultana, there is a bit of date there, but as you move further forward, I don't think you really get anything different out of it, to be honest. Yeah, like when you take the beer in, you get a wee bit of a raisiny, it's more of a pruny sharpness actually, because it does even still have that kind of dry element to it. So yeah, a wee bit of pruny character when you take it in, but then the base, yeah, the base is a little bit of a more, as I say, like sultana, dried white green grapes, and yeah, a bit of a more kind of dried white green grapey sort of thing, but also yeah, a kind of datey type vibe to it as well. So yeah, the fruity character from the hoppy side of this beer is very dry as well, which is interesting. But overall, it's a very nice beer, this one. The thing that lingers into the aftertaste is the sort of cakey side of the beer. The dry fruits are there, of course, and the wood really comes out quite nicely. So yeah, this is a really interesting beer, this one. I think this is probably as close to a pastry stout as I've had from Dugas Brewery. Yeah, I'm not sure if you could consider this a pastry stout actually, but yeah, it is quite nice in a sense. It's a bit different from the more kind of raw, straight up Russian Imperial stouts we've had, or the coffee Imperial stouts that we've had from Dugas in the past. But yeah, the overall question would be, is it my favourite Dugas Imperial stout? I would say no, because I think Key and Sidamo Dimtu are very hard to displace in that regard, and of course Big Egypt follows them quite closely. But is it nice and enjoyable? Absolutely, and you can't ask for much more than that these days from Dugas and their Imperial Stout range. They're doing different things and seeing how it goes, which is absolutely fine. But let's round off this wee review then with a look at the mouthfeel. Mouthfeel, as I said, for me this beer is kind of bottom end of full bodied. The carbonation is very smooth. It's got that typical Scandinavian cleanliness to it, if we can call it that. So yeah, I do like that. You've got a nice kind of cleanliness to it, a little bit of an oily character, and yeah, it does give it a little bit of an oiliness to it. But as we said, this beer has quite a bit of dryness because of the barrel aging. You get that nice dried fruity vibe out of it throughout the whole thing. The malt base is quite kind of bready and savoury, as we've mentioned as well. Not really a lot of sweetness to it. In terms of IBUs, I wouldn't be surprised if this beer is kind of around the sort of 40-ish mark. But as I say, a lot of the kind of there's a bit of a conflation in this beer between spiciness and bitterness. It's difficult to kind of put your finger on it, if we can say it like that. But so yeah, you get quite a bit of spiciness out of this beer that could be conflated as bitterness, but it works and it suits the beer overall. So yeah, quite a bit of dryness in this beer from the spicy character. So it gives it's almost, the spiciness that you get out of this beer is almost akin to, like I say, 40 or maybe 50 IBU side of things. But you have to remember that in Imperial Stout, some of the bitterness will come from the malt base. But yeah, this is another really interesting beer from Dugas Brewery, and I'm glad that I got to try this one. So yeah, let's leave it at that. This one was the Cake Galore, an 11.5% cognac barrel aged. I think it's safe to say pastry stout with this one, to be honest, from Dugas Brewery in Landvetter near Gothenburg on the west coast of Sweden. So yeah, give this one a try and see what you think. But once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Dugas Brewery as well. And we will return to these guys again quite soon. My very first cognac barrel-aged Imperial Stout from these guys. But check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll see you guys in the next review. Sláinte, skål, and cheers.